Welcome and thank you all for joining us today. We're here today to present our webinar, Let's Talk Small Business, with special guest, Minister Chrystia Freeland. Before we begin, a note on the GoToWebinar platform. On the platform, you'll see a blue or orange flower icon on your screen. You'll see the handouts pane where you'll find today's presentation. This mainly contains additional resources available for you. There is also a questions pane where you can enter your questions for our panelists today, and we try to answer as many questions as we can throughout the entire presentation. Following the webinar, please take a moment to complete a short survey to let us know your experience today, and tomorrow you will receive a recording of the session by email. And with that, I will now introduce Laura Jones, our Executive Vice President and Chief Strategic Officer. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks so much, Alexa, and welcome everyone to a special edition of our regular COVID webinars. And as usual, I'm co-hosting today with my colleague Corinne, who's our resident expert in all things Ottawa, and she'll be joining a little bit later in the webinar to help put questions to the Finance Minister. But this webinar series is one that we started at the beginning of the pandemic to help businesses navigate the alphabet soup of government programs needed to support you through this extraordinary time. So I want to say welcome to our regular webinar participants. Many of you have been with us right since the beginning, and it's always great to have you with us. And also welcome to members who may be joining for the first time. Before we get going with today's program, I'll just give everyone a quick reminder of the other resources that we have available to you. So our website is available, and we do keep our website updated very regularly, and we use questions that come through these webinars, questions that come through our surveys and our helpline. So we're using your questions to keep this updated. The second option, of course, is our helpline, and our counselors are always really happy to hear from you and talk to you directly about your needs. And so feel free to give us a call on the helpline. And then finally, as Alexa mentioned, there's a deck for this webinar, I believe, that's available with most relevant and information that we've had on from previous webinars. So things like business openings across Canada and some of the basics on the programs are available in the appendix to this deck. So feel free to check that out if that may be of interest to you. And then we have an upcoming webinar with CRA, and so we'll let you know when that's happening. And now, it's my great pleasure to ask Dan Kelly to join us. And Dan, you are, if you can turn on your video, hello. And it's been you, Corinne, and I talk about these webinars regularly. And I know you've been wanting to join for a while, and we've been wanting you to join for a while, and we've been looking for just the right opportunity, and we found it. So we're excited to have you join us today. I don't think that this group, I don't think you need much introduction with this group, but I did want to say a couple of things. You've been with CFIB for over 2 decades. You started in our Winnipeg office and then moved to Ottawa and then Toronto, but I know you've seen an awful lot of the country through this job, and you often remark on what a pleasure it's been to get to know Canada through working with businesses across the country. And I know our members have probably seen you on TV or heard you on the radio giving voice to their concerns and what we're hearing through our surveys. But I just wanted to say, as someone who's worked with you for well over a decade now, that I was impressed right from the beginning of starting to work together at how dedicated you were to the mission of giving small businesses a voice and to help improving conditions for them. And at the best of times, I would say you are incredibly dedicated. We have not been in the best of times, and you and the rest of the staff at CFIB have doubled down or tripled down on that dedication through the pandemic, and have been working tirelessly to make sure that our members have a voice. So with that very brief introduction, we're really happy to have you join us. I'll turn things over to you to maybe say a few words and introduce our special guest, and then we'll get right to as many questions as we can for the Minister.
Thank you, Laura. And I think what Laura's trying to find a nice way to say is she's trying to explain my rapid hair loss and the big bags under my eyes over the last number of months. But look, it's great to have our members with us today. Really happy to have our special guest join us. And I wanted to just make make sure that that you know how closely we've been working with the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland. We have had over the last number of years at CFIB a bit of a frosty relationship with the Department of Finance in particular, a few fights along the way. But from the very day that, that Minister Freeland, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, took the reins in finance, relations have really steadily improved. I took it as a real testament to our members' plight during the pandemic, that on her very first day as Minister of Finance, the Deputy Prime Minister called me and we spoke at some length about some of the issues that small and medium-sized businesses were facing during the pandemic. And I've counted on the Deputy Prime Minister to speak on a fairly regular basis ever since that. Then you would be shocked, and I was shocked in my almost 30 years of advocacy work. Very, very few ministers will respond to a direct email as quickly as the Minister or Deputy Prime Minister has. And so it's a great pleasure for me to introduce the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, the Minister of Finance for Canada, the Honourable Chrystia Freeland. So great to have you with us today, Chrystia. For those that don't know her incredibly impressive background, after some time as a journalist, the minister was, Chrystia became elected as the MP for Toronto Centre in July 2013, and then re-elected in 2019. A list of accomplishments, many of the minister's accomplishments have been directly attributable and directly connected to Canada's business community, including her renegotiation of the NAFTA deal, the new Canada CUSMA. And so we've had many connection points to some of the files that she has taken on. And I've been really pleased to meet with her. We haven't agreed on absolutely everything, but what I've appreciated is the listening ear that we've had at CFIB at the very highest levels of the Government of Canada. Chrystia, I don't see you on my screen right now. I don't know if you were, oh, there you are. Look at that. Thank you, Alexa. You're back. I just wanted to, just share a couple of things from our conversations. I know, and you know, that there are some issues that are pretty serious concerns on the part of our members at this point. What I want to do is focus on some of the things that, some of the successes that you've had. The wage subsidy. When you first took office, one of the big files was a giant gap in the rent support program in Canada. And I was so grateful to you for putting your time and energy into getting that program into a much better position for the length of the pandemic. Also really encouraged in your most recent budget with many things, including the additional ability for small business owners to deduct some of their major investments more quickly. But the hiring credit, I'd love you to share a little bit more about what the hiring program will look like over the summer months. I think that's got a ton of potential to help us as we move into the recovery phase. But as you know, there are also some remaining fairly big gaps that we at CFIB have been talking about. One of them being support for new business owners that perhaps were in development before the pandemic hit, and then launching their businesses. That's been a real struggle. Also some concerns, as I'm sure we'll hear from members through the Q&A, about the generosity of the wage and the rent subsidy over the summer months, especially given how late some of the reopening phases are, with Ontario not looking till late July before many of our members are able to open. So with that, I just want to say a huge thank you to you for joining us. Thank you for all the heavy lifting that you've done in incredible circumstances, and I'm so happy to have, I think what we have here, if my screen's correct, 700 small business owners online with us right now, listening to you. That's a very impressive turnout. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Dan. And can you hear me?
We sure can.
Okay, and everyone, I am in my attic in quarantine, so the tech support is sort of me. I was aided, I put my computer at the bottom of the attic, or actually, anyway, I got help from a child, but sorry for the informality. And let me just start with a couple of opening comments, and then I'm going to try to address the specific things that Dan has raised. And I'm going to start by saying, please, if there are going to be directly questions from the people listening to us, please call me Chrystia. I work for you, and I'm very, very mindful of that. And I also just want to say that at a very personal level, I have a profound appreciation of the importance of small businesses, very often family run, to the Canadian economy. We heard in the introduction of Dan that he's originally from Winnipeg. I'm originally from Northern Alberta. My dad was a farmer. And, you know, growing up on a family farm, you really do understand, you know, both the pleasures, but also the fears, the risks, you know, the ulcer-making anxiety of running a small family business. And you understand the extent to which, like, it's a whole family thing. And so I just want to say to you, I really believe that small businesses are the heart of the Canadian economy. You know yourselves that you provide the lion's share of jobs in Canada. But I also believe in your tremendous importance in building our communities and really building Canadian society. And I also really do know your business is not just a job. Your business is something that you live 24/7, and your partners do, and your kids do, and your parents do, and your brothers and sisters and cousins. So I just wanted to start by saying that. And then I also want to start by saying thank you so much. You know, the numbers show me that small and medium, you know, COVID has had a very uneven impact on the Canadian economy. And it is you guys who have been hit really, really hard. I am very, very aware of that. And to every single one of you who is still running a business, who is still, you know, on your feet, I just want to say thank you so much. I am so grateful to you for hanging in there. If you'll permit me, I'm proud of you. I do not underestimate how hard it's been. And I see your resilience as so essential to the whole country. We as a country are not going to have an economic rebound until our small businesses are really back up on their feet and thriving. It's been really important, obviously, for us throughout the crisis to support you. Dan is telling you the truth. He always would. I've worked closely with him and through him with you, and I've heard your pleas. I'm very aware that we haven't been able to provide all the forms of support that you would have liked. But I do hope that you know that we've tried to provide a lot of support, and that has been important to us. And what we're looking at now is how can we continue to provide that support through the recovery. So that's kind of my little opener. And now let me talk a little bit about a few specifics. So as we pivot into the recovery, and you know, I am quarantined in my attic, so I haven't yet seen the Toronto patios, but I know that they're there, and I'm very, very excited. I get released Saturday night. And my kids had some ice cream yesterday after a soccer game, so I know that it exists. So I know the recovery is starting, and you know, one thing we can be really grateful of to our country and to our compatriots is Canadians turn out to be very, very smart, and Canadians are getting vaccinated as fast as they can and as fast as the vaccines are available. That's really good news, and that, you know, knock on wood, gives me confidence that although I know the reopening is slower than people would have liked, and I have confidence that there's going to be no going back. And as we get more and more vaccinated, we're going to be on a more and more secure glide path into real economic takeoff. So we've been thoughtful about trying to have some measures in place to help you, and through you, Canada, come roaring back economically. I'll mention a couple of them, and then I'll talk about the other areas that Dan raised. So I'm glad that Dan mentioned the Canada Recovery Hiring Credit. This is a personal pet program of mine. Our thinking is that it's a risk for all of you to bring on new people. And I'm sure you're all brave and resilient, but I put myself in your shoes and I think it's kind of scary. You've just been through this yo-yo of COVID. And what we wanted to do was kind of share in the risk and give you a little bit of support if you decide to hire new workers or to increase the hours of your existing workers, because I know one response a lot of you have had wanting to keep your workers on is just to reduce the hours. So it applies to increasing hours. And it also applies, you know, I know in some businesses that I've spoken to, people have said, we talked to our workers and they took a pay cut because they wanted to keep the job and they wanted to keep the business going. If you want to increase compensation, this program can be used for that too. It's on the same platform as the wage subsidy, and we want you to get the best possible deal from the government. So take a look at this program. It starts in June. It's retroactive to the beginning of June, and it will run to November. If you get a better deal with the wage subsidy, by all means, please continue to use the wage subsidy. But if you've been hiring new workers or increasing hours, I think you will find you get a better deal with the hiring credit. And the other thing that I will mention about the hiring credit is, by design, it is going to support, it's going to be particularly geared towards a seasonal business because it looks back to where you were in March. So I'm very aware that seasonal businesses in hospitality and tourism are particularly hit. This program is designed to give you some little extra support. Now, I want to mention a couple of other programs to help you kind of lean into the recovery. One of them, which I am really excited about, is $1.5 million for the next 3 years of immediate expensing of new investments that you make in yourselves. The idea here is, I really believe, and I am doing my best to ensure that we have an extremely robust recovery and that you are going to be operating in an environment where your business can really grow. I want to help you invest in yourself. So 1.5 million immediate expensing for this year and for 3 years going forward. Please consider it. The other program that I'd really like you to think about is, I know a lot of small businesses have been pushed by the pandemic to move into the digital space. A lot of businesses, maybe you've been thinking about doing it for a while, but with the pandemic, you had no choice and you did it. We have put together a digital adoption program that will provide a combination of cash grants for smaller businesses, loans for larger ones, and advice to adopt new technology, particularly digital technology. And I really urge you to have a look at this. It's an opportunity to take this moment of tremendous change and make yourselves more productive and ultimately, therefore, I hope and believe, more profitable and serve more people. And then maybe the final thing which I'll mention is the Canada Small Business Financing Program, where we've increased the loan size to $500,000, and the maximum repayment period has been extended to 15 years for certain loans. So I know I can already hear people saying, but we already have a lot of debt. We don't want to take on more credit. I understand that. I am sympathetic to the fiscal prudence of Canadians. But for people who see an opportunity in the economic recovery, this support is there for you to expand and grow. I'm sorry, Dan, I've been talking for a while, but you raised two specific concerns, so let me address those. First, the question about new businesses. And, let me say a couple of things. The first is, I feel the first duty of the government was to support businesses that were up and running when the pandemic hit. I see COVID really as a brand new type of economic recession. It's much more like a natural disaster than the usual kind of sort of endogenous economic crisis. And so it seemed to me apparent right from the beginning that, this is like a flood. It's like a wildfire, and we have to support Canadians to get through it. It was not their fault. This is not because businesses made mistakes in failing to plan. And for me, that means first and foremost, you support the guys who had a business when the wildfire hit. That's the core duty. I do want to say, though, I have huge admiration, and I hope and imagine that there are some new businesses that were formed during the pandemic that are listening to us. And I want to say you are great and you are amazing. And the kind of entrepreneurial zeal and courage it took to do that is the kind of spirit that the Canadian economy needs. So I recognize that. I do, though, want to say that because of the generosity of our business support programs, and having looked around the rest of the world a little bit, I do think there's no country that has had more generous business support programs than Canada. Because of and that's a good thing, because of the generosity of those programs, we have had to be mindful about integrity concerns. You all pay a lot of taxes, and I think you want a finance minister who, of course, spends money to do the right thing, but is thoughtful about not throwing money out or having money go to bad guys. And I am sure that everyone listening to this is a good guy. But I think you will appreciate that with the generosity of the programs, we needed to have some kind of checks to be sure it was legitimate businesses that were applying for them. And with a business that had already been running, it's obvious what those checks are, right? You can compare to previous revenues. You can't fake how you were doing in 2019. With new businesses, I hope people will appreciate the challenges around integrity are much, much greater. And even, we've had different ideas on how you could get around that. They're incredibly labor intensive. So I don't expect you to feel sorry for the struggles of the finance minister to design programs to support you, but I do want you to appreciate that the challenges are genuine, and we're still wrestling with them. And what I do want to say to the new businesses is these new programs to help all Canadian small businesses come roaring back are available to new businesses too. So the digital adoption program, that is available to you. The small business financing program, that is available to you. The 1.5 million of immediate expensing for this year and for 3 years, that is available to you. So there is support there. I appreciate it's not the same level of support that pre-existing businesses had. And we are thinking about whether there's any extra boost we can provide. Dan, you then asked about the step down in the support programs. And in a way, I'm glad you asked the question, because it means the support programs are helpful if people are kind of thoughtful about how they step down. And what I want to say there is the step down hasn't started yet. It is due to begin in July. We are going to be watching very, very closely how the reopening is going. I'll point out also that the CRB is stepping down as well from 500 to 300. And I guess what I want to say to you is, to all of you, is our challenge, and I see it as a challenge for every single one of us at different aspects of it. I think this is the summer of the pivot. This is the summer of turning the dial, going from surviving COVID to the economy coming roaring back. And it's a challenge for you as business people. You need to operate differently. It's a challenge for me as finance minister. I need to support you in different ways. What we've calculated is that pivot is going to happen in the middle of July, not immediately, by the way, not abruptly, because it's a step down. And we've tried to make it gradual, with it beginning in July, the program still running to the end of September, and the recovery hiring credit coming in from June to November to provide an additional glide path. I am very aware of the unpredictability of this virus. I think one thing it has done is make us all humble about our ability to see into the future. And so we do have the tools to alter that path if we need to. And we're going to be watching closely the economic numbers. But I do finally want to appeal to what I believe to be your fiscal prudence of all of you. We said at the beginning of the crisis we would do whatever it takes to support Canadians and Canadian businesses. And I think you've seen us live up to that. We also have had a goal of doing it in a fiscally prudent and sustainable way without increasing tax burdens on small and medium-sized businesses. And you know what, I'll tell you guys something I haven't said before, please don't say it publicly, but I said to the Prime Minister when he asked me to be his finance minister, I said, I'm going to try to do two things, Prime Minister. I'm going to try to do whatever we need to do, and we don't know how long or how much, to support Canadians and Canadian businesses. And I really want to keep our AAA credit rating. That is really important for the federal government's cost of borrowing. And it also has a sort of trickle-down effect on the cost of borrowing of provinces, territories, even businesses. And you know what, guys? A week after the budget, S&P reaffirmed Canada's AAA credit rating. And a couple of weeks ago, Moody's reaffirmed Canada's AAA credit rating, and we're on a stable outlook. But part of what they're expecting me to do is not have the COVID support programs for anybody be eternal. They are counting on me to live up to my budget commitment of pivoting. And so we do need to do that, tempered, of course, by the reality that we have to see how the reopening actually plays out. Okay, Dan, I'm going to stop talking. That's my first stab at things.
Well, look, you've unpacked an awful lot just there, and I know we have lots of members with lots of questions, and Corinne and Laura are going to guide us through that. So with your permission, Deputy Prime Minister, or Chrystia, as you asked me to call you, the Minister and I share a Ukrainian-Canadian heritage. I'll turn you over to Laura and Corinne to help facilitate some of our member questions. Thank you so much for your opening comments.
Yes, and thank you very much. I think you've answered a lot of questions, but it's also elicited a lot more questions. So we have tons of them coming in. So we'll really just jump right into it, if you don't mind, because I think people are eager to hear. So first question I'm going to is actually, we had a bunch of questions come in pre the webinar, as well as we have many coming in, but I'm going to ask you one that came in before. It's from Christine. She said she wanted to thank you for the quick action of supports for small businesses throughout the pandemic. It's been truly needed and appreciated. She feels as though the recovery for small businesses, especially those such as hers, which is in the food and hospitality business, will take even longer to recover. And so you've touched on this a little bit, but maybe do it again. Oh. And she wanted to know, would you consider either forgiving the CEBA loans given to us and or continue both the SUS and SURS for at least the remainder of 2021? And I will say, I know you touched on this, but I would say a good chunk of the questions we're getting are around that theme of like, it's still really hard for us. Things are really difficult, especially in Ontario, but also in other parts or in certain sectors. And they just feel like it's too soon to start losing access. So I'll let you sort of speak specifically to that, but I think it's a broader message people want to hear one more time.
Okay, well, thank you, Corinne. And hi, Christine. Thank you for your question. I just stood up to turn on a light because I saw that I was looking like I was totally in darkness here. So thank you for the question, Corinne, and Christine. And let me just say this. I hope that you have seen, and I would specifically point to the government actions in the fall. When we had the second wave hit us, I think harder than a lot of people had been expecting. And we put the measures back strongly in place and actually stepped the wage subsidy back up to the higher level. So I hope you've seen that we recognize our support measures need to be tailored to what is happening with the virus and therefore with the economy. And that's my commitment to you, that we will continue to take that approach. We had to make a sort of some educated estimates in the budget about what the course of the pandemic and the reopening would be, because we needed to offer people some sense of what would be happening with the pivot and with the support programs. I am still cautiously optimistic that that sort of curve which we predicted, it seems to be holding. Having said that, you know, we have the Delta variant, and the virus has surprised us before. And I think also, you know, something we're seeing particularly from the US is the reopening also is not necessarily a smooth curve, right? There was a great article in the Financial Times talking about the ketchup bottle economy, like a traditional glass ketchup bottle where the ketchup sticks and it kind of comes out in spurts. And I think that's a good metaphor. And I am also humble around the likelihood that having gone through this unprecedented shock, you know, where we turned our economy off, then we kind of turned it on and back, you know, we dialed it back and forth and back and forth. We should expect that we should expect the unexpected in the reopening. So we're going to be watching closely. We have put in, you know, we have put in place a pivot that we think will work. And I'm really glad that Dan mentioned the hiring credit at the beginning, because that was kind of meant also to smooth the path into recovery. But what I do promise you is we're going to keep on looking closely. And if it looks as if our, you know, best effort prediction is not consistent with the needs of Canadian businesses, we are absolutely prepared to sort of tweak, you know, turn the dial a bit. And I do want to specifically point to the specific support for tourism. There's $1 billion set aside in the regional development funds for the tourism sector, because that has faced particular challenges. So, you know, the other thing that I would urge small businesses to do is also, you know, take a look at your RDAs and look at what are the specific programs available there, because, you know, I think one of the things that is going to be happening is part of the pivot is going from these very broad workhorse measures that have supported a huge amount of the Canadian economy and cost a lot of money, to more bespoke, more targeted types of support.
Thanks.
And remember, I want to say one more thing on CEBA. Remember, a lot of it is forgivable. Remember that part.
Right. And I think what we're hearing from a lot of members is that the more of the forgivable loans are really important, have been really important, and more of that, particularly for the hard hit sectors. You know, so for example, you mentioned tourism as a sector that has some additional grant money. We also are hearing a lot from events-based businesses where they're saying, you know, look, the summer 2021 now is kind of because people have to plan their events in advance, and so there's a 2 or 3 month runway for these businesses to get up and running. And we hear a lot of concern from events-based businesses on the fact that the SUS and the CERS amounts are coming down. I don't know if there's anything specific that you want to address for those businesses, and then maybe I'll give you another follow-up on the new business side as well.
Sure. Yeah. So there are, those are really good points, Laura. And basically, you know, the particular sort of even more than small businesses overall, I would say the particularly challenged sectors have been tourism and hospitality and what you might want to call cultural events sector. And so there is set aside support that the regional development agencies have to offer those businesses, and there is HAZCAP. So I would urge people to take a look there. I do also want to say, I understand the desire for certainty. And I think one of the hardest things about this pandemic for everyone, but you know, very much for businesses, has been that things are changing all the time. And how can you plan and how can you build? I do want us also to appreciate that the nature of the and so just back on the certainty point, and that's part of the reason why we outlined a pivot path in the budget. But I think we have to balance that desire for certainty with just the reality that we have to have humility about both the course of the pandemic and also the course of the economy. And, you know, we have already, again, I think, you know, looking to the US where the reopening happened sooner, you're already seeing some very, very hot economic sectors. So we have to be aware of that possibility as well. And also, again, humble about the fact that we don't have perfect foreknowledge about where that activity is going to be and where it's not going to be.
Can I just add on to that, Laura? I just, you know, I have a good example here, and it's of the event side, and a lot of people, of course, are talking about the debt load, and you've spoken to that as well, and the fact that it's difficult for them to take on more debt. Is there a way they could be more forgivable? But one other small piece of this, and that's, I'm going to use Dave as an example. Dave is and he has a sector, youth sports, and his sector in youth sports has been closed in Peel and Toronto for 8 months. And he was saying this will leave us only 17 months to repay a $40,000 debt for CEBA. Our member club businesses do not have those type of profit margins to accumulate these funds. So he has two questions. One is, will you increase the forgivable portion, which you've touched on a little bit, and extend the repayment period? That's another theme that's been coming up. I think people are a little afraid that they haven't been able to make any profits, and now that timeline to sort of get the forgivable portion is coming up very quickly. So I think I wanted to sort of throw that. He does go on to say, thank you for your honest and heartfelt introduction. It is nice to know you understand what it is that we are going through. So just wanted to share that with you as well.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Dave. And I would say, Dave and Christine and Lauren Corrine, can you guys give me 30 seconds? Because I had technical difficulties and I'm using a child's computer, I just need to quickly plug it in because it's running out of power, okay? But just give me 1 second.
Feels like we're in one of those magazines where like they have to plug in their computers just like us.
Well,
That's
there you
true.
go.
We don't have a whole bunch of people doing all these things for them. Yes, that's right.
No, it's just like us. But I see Dan's come up, so maybe Dan has a comment he wants to make as well.
I was just going to say, it's like when my kid runs in to get his printing from the printer as I'm doing a live TV show. It's kind of in that in that camp.
Okay, I have done it. So let me say to Dave, a big part of the value of conversations like this for me is hearing people's needs and people's concerns. So let me say to you, Dave, I hear you. And thank you for making 2 such specific points. The balance that I need to strike is really providing the support that entrepreneurs, business people like you need, while also, you know, for the whole, on behalf of the whole country, including you, charting a fiscally sustainable and prudent course. And so, you know, I am looking for a Goldilocks solution where we're providing just as much support as small businesses need, but not spending more money than we have to. That's the balance I'm trying to strike, but I do hear you. And what I can commit to you now is it's something that we're going to watch closely. And speaking with humility for myself, I think we just don't know for sure what the impact of the, you know, we're gonna have to monitor the impact of 2 things. One is the pivot away from the government support programs. Where will businesses be? And the other is the reopening and what it looks like and the impact on businesses. And so we're going to have to watch those 2 things closely and try to calibrate all the different support measures to be sure that businesses, you know, you have the support you need. I'm very sincere in saying I need you to recover. I really, really do. While at the same time, you know, wanting to be a good manager of the nation's finances.
So I think it's, you know, like us, you're saying there's a lot of value in these conversations. You know, when we're bringing you, when Dan's talking to you on the phone about what's going on, this is what we're bringing you, is what we hear on these webinars, what we hear through our surveys. And so one of the things I just want to say to our to our members who have joined us today is, I think we'll make sure that you get all the comments and questions from this. Not that you'll be able to respond to everyone individually, but I think you'll find a lot of value. And I know, Corinne, we've got so many coming in where there's no way we're going to get to them all. So I think like we always find a lot of value in those comments. So just to reassure members that if we can't pose your specific question, we will get them to the finance minister. But I just want to come back to, for a minute, the new business, because, you know, we're, as Corinne said, we're hearing a lot about the reduction in CSRS and CEWS and concern about that it may be too soon. So you've heard that now, and you've heard some examples. But I want to also give a little more flavor too, because there's just so many questions and comments about the new business piece. And I appreciate what you said about, you know, it's like a flood and, you know, helping those businesses that were already had, you know, started. But we hear an awful lot from business owners who essentially started in sometime in March or April, and they had already signed leases, they had already paid for inventories, they had already invested a lot of time and energy in getting, and it was really an accident of timing. It wasn't, they knew COVID was here and now they're going to start a business. And I'll just give you an example from Christian, who opened in the spring of 2020, so was in that position where he says it was the timing of our opening that made him ineligible for CEWS and CERS. And for our business, this has meant an additional $285,000 in debt in order to keep our doors open and our staff employed. And so I just want to make that plug because as you can appreciate, I think they feel, a lot of these businesses feel like they really should be included in that category with those businesses that were already existing. And I appreciate what you're saying about wanting to protect things from fraud and the other considerations and the technical considerations, but I feel like our members are going to want to hear a little more from you on this one.
Thank you, Laura. And Laura, can you tell me what the name of that person was?
Christian.
Yes,
but there's so many others that I could start.
I know there's a lot,
Melinda,
but
there's so many others that have essentially the same story.
So Christian, thank you for listening. Thank you for your question. And, you know, I think it's an important one in its specificity, because at least in my mind, there are sort of three categories of small and medium-sized businesses. There are the people who were up and running when COVID hit. That's the biggest category. And those are the ones where, you know, the programs have largely been built for them, as they have to be. You know, you build it for the main group. But then there are two other categories, right? There is the group that Christian represents, who are people who maybe weren't up and running before COVID hit, but they were committed. You know, they had begun that dive off the cliff into founding a new business. And, you know, there's that great line in Macbeth about, you know, it's harder to go back across the river than to keep on crossing. And there's a particular group of businesses in that category who I think are also a particular category, right? Not up and running before, but committed to setting up. And then there is the group of businesses who actually, in the middle of COVID, decided to set up. And I, you know, don't know about the businesses listening today, but I've particularly heard from that final category from businesses in Atlantic Canada. There were hundreds of restaurants set up in Halifax last summer because Atlantic Canada did such a good job of fighting COVID. So those are three different categories. And I think that sort of second category, you know, I agree with you, Christian. You merit particular consideration. I don't expect any of you guys, you know, to feel sorry for finance ministers and their officials racking their brains to solve these particular cases. But I do want you to know I'm very aware of it. I do a lot of roundtables with different business groups across the country, and I hear about this a lot. And by the way, I hear about it from MPs very often as well, because MPs hear about it in their community. The integrity challenge remains with that in-between group of businesses because they don't have the pre-COVID numbers that they can look back to. And it's an integrity challenge, and it's also a how do you create a program that can be administered at scale and where the support can be deployed quickly? Because if you don't have relatively simple criteria for qualifying, there are a lot of hoops the businesses need to jump through and a lot of human beings who need to do the work to double check. So again, I don't want to belabor the point. I know that people like Christian are just like, come on, please just give me the support I need. But I guess what I do want to do is assure you that it's something we've been thinking about hard and have been banging our heads against. And I do also want to say, and this may be cold comfort, but the measures that I have been describing, things like the small business financing, things like the digital adoption, things like this 1.5 million immediate expensing, these are things that all small businesses can benefit from. So That's all I can say right now, but I do hear you.
Corinne, do you want to jump in? We're probably starting to run up against the clock, so we've probably got time for a couple more, and then we'll have to wrap up.
Yeah, so I wanted to, obviously the bulk of these are COVID, but they're not all COVID related. And so I did want to touch on one of the more non-COVID related, which I think has been in the news today a little bit, which is around intergenerational transfers. And so Anna has written to say, amid all the COVID fallout that we're seeing, there are many small businesses undergoing intergenerational transfers right now. In many instances, there are punitive tax consequences, as you know, if they are actually going to sell it to a family member rather than to a third party. And then she does recognize there is a bill, as I'm sure you know, in the Senate right now. She does sort of mention Bill C-208, and wants to understand why this issue continues to be a difficult one. And many Liberals voted against the bill, so she wants to just understand, she feels it's important because so many businesses, especially in COVID, are looking to get out of their business or transfer it or do something. Is there any sort of, I guess, feedback or thoughts or commentary you can provide to her on that front?
Yeah, and can you tell me her name again, Corinne?
It's Anna.
Anna. Okay. Hi, Anna. Yeah, let me say a couple of things. So first of all, I mentioned at the beginning growing up on a family farm. So let me assure you, Anna, this is an issue I'm very familiar with. And I'm the Member of Parliament for University Rosedale in downtown Toronto. But I feel by my hometown community in Peace River, Alberta, they treat me as if I belong to them too, especially the farmers, and they all send me emails whenever they want me to do something. So just to assure you, I hear about this issue a lot. You asked Anna one specific thing, which shows me that you're really paying attention, which I love, about Liberal votes on this private members bill. And so here I want to tell you about a very specific practice, which is a long-standing practice, but which I do believe in, which is when the finance department strongly believes, and actually governments, Canadian governments believe, that it is really important for changes in tax policy to be made only through the budget process and not through private members' bills. And that applies whichever party is putting forward the private members' bills. And the reason for that is to have integrity in the budget process, where if you're changing taxes, you are changing the bottom line. And that should happen as part of a comprehensive process where, if you're cutting taxes, basically, you have to have some thought on the revenue side about that. So speaking as a finance minister, this is a practice I strongly, strongly endorse. And I'll just leave it there, but there's a rationale for that. On the specifics of it, I hear you, and I have heard a lot of actually very personal. I was going to say impassioned, and I thought maybe that's inappropriate, but they are really impassioned testimonies about this. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about right at the beginning, that small businesses are often about more than economic. They're about more than the bottom line. They're about a family and generations and community and a way of life. So I have a lot of sympathy with all of those perspectives. I think I've explained the sort of classic finance perspective on how you make tax policy, which I support as well. And when it comes to the budget, which we tabled on April 19th, my view was we needed to be very strict about our focus. It was a budget that had some very heavy lifting to do, finish the fight against COVID, and set our country on a very strong recovery track. I tried to do that in the budget, but I also tried to be pretty strict with myself and everyone around me to say, this is a big enough challenge. This is not the moment to do a whole bunch of other things, even if they're things we've wanted to do for a long time. But there will be more budgets, I hope and believe.
So I'm going to try and sneak 3 questions into one on 3 different topics.
Okay.
For the last question, but I'll just make them brief and see if you want to pick up on any of these themes as a last question, and then we'll wind up. Diane is saying it's become almost impossible to find and keep good staff during this pandemic, and so that's a sentiment that I think you should know is coming out strongly in the comments. Not really for you to necessarily, I mean, you may have something you want to say on that, but just to be aware that we're hearing a lot of that. So Diane wants you to know that. And of course, the support programs and where they're at, that's an important balance that, you know, that is coming up as well. The second topic I'm going to rapid fire at you is red tape. So Melinda is just making a comment, and again, this is more to make sure you've heard that this is a strong sentiment from small businesses. The process for applying for government subsidies is not easy enough for small businesses to do without hiring someone to help. I know one business owner who said that they just gave up because the process was too complicated and they didn't have the funds to hire anyone to help. And so, you know, basically the question is, you know, what can you do to help? But I think making you and your cabinet ministers aware that this is really, really important. Obviously, CFIB is trying to play a big role in helping businesses here through our counseling. That would be the second comment. And then the third one, my rapid fire at you, and I'm trying to think, there were so many, I don't have a specific name here, but many travel agents and others are concerned about the US border. And, you know, their business isn't really going to get back to normal until that border is open. So those are 3 rapid fire to cover some of the other questions at you, and then we'll wrap up. Unless,
okay.
Corinne, you have one you want to sneak in. Okay.
Okay, those are excellent questions. And by the way, great to have so many women asking questions. One of the things that I think is so great and valuable about small businesses is they can be a great, great path for women. It's great for everyone to be your own boss, but maybe especially great for women, and maybe women balancing families and stuff. So that's wonderful. So I do want to comment on Diane's comment about staff, because it's something that I think about a lot. And I want to offer 3 comments there, actually. The first one is, that is one reason why, I don't know, I don't imagine you guys do watch Question Period in the House of Commons, but, you know, if you did, you would hear the push, the pressure that we get around the stepping down of the CRB from $500 to $300. But that's part of the pivot too. And I do think that COVID has revealed that Canada's social safety net is incomplete, and we need to look at filling those gaps. You know, it was a social safety system designed for the 20th century. We're in the 21st, but the CRB is not the thing to fill those gaps. And that is a disaster relief measure. And just as the business support programs need to pivot, that needs to pivot too. And that pivot is part of the recovery. So I just want to say to Diane and to everybody else, I am mindful of that. Number 2, awareness of the staff issue is one reason we designed the hiring credit the way we did, and allowed you to use it to increase hours of the workers you have, or to increase their compensation to a certain level. Because keeping the workers you have, I think, is also one of the things that people are going to want to do. So I just want to point attention to that. And then the final thing is, One of the big themes of the budget was increasing Canada's labor force participation. That is a way that we become more productive as an economy. And look, in a way, people are not going to be happy to hear me say this, but businesses saying, wow, we can't find enough workers, I much prefer that, hearing that challenge, to hearing millions and millions of people saying, I can't find a job, right? As a country, as an economy, we'd rather be a place where, you know, we need more workers. But if that's the case, and that's the position businesses are in, I want us to have measures in place encouraging people to get out to work and making it possible for them to do that. And there are two specific measures in the budget that are really about that. One is the early learning and childcare. This is going to take a little bit of time to fully deliver, but for people who, you know, all of us who are not in Quebec, it has increased labor force participation of women tremendously, particularly mothers of very young children. And that is going to be a real engine providing all of you guys with great potential employees. The other measure in the budget that is really about giving people encouragement to work is the Canada Workers Benefit. This is a top up to people who are working and are working at lower wage jobs. And this is something that's a particular program that I really believe in, because I don't think any of us thinks that Canadians who are working should live in poverty. But I also would like people who are in poverty to have an incentive to work, and that being the path to really increase their incomes. So the Canada Workers Benefit does exactly that, and it tops up the incomes of people who are at the bottom of the income scale. And what we've done is just make a whole bunch more people, about 1 million more people, eligible for it. And I really, please be sure that people know about this program. People aren't always aware of it because it just, you get it as part of your tax return. But I do want to say to people, these two measures, early learning and childcare and Canada Workers Benefit, should really increase labor force participation. And that's an important way, Diane, that we get you more workers. And then very quickly, so Melinda, red tape, things are hard to apply for. I am so sympathetic to this. And please, you know, you yourself, and I'm going to ask Dan and Laura and Corrine, share as many specifics as you can. And also here, I'm going to ask you guys to help me strike the balance. Because if you listen back to what we've just been talking about, the red tape challenge, I totally agree with. But wanting bespoke programs, whether they are to meet the needs of new businesses or businesses in hard hit sectors, that adds to the complexity of what we need to deliver. And I believe we need to try to sort of optimize for both variables. But I guess I want to say to Melinda, I take your concerns and the desire to make things as simple as possible. I take those very seriously. And that does mean that we're not able to have programs that meet every single specific case. And then finally, on the US border and travel agents. So first of all, to travel agents, I think you are great. And I am very aware of the specific hit that you have taken here. And you're kind of, it's as bad as for the airlines, but you're not an airline. And I do want, A, I want you to know that I know that. And B, we took that into account in the voucher refund program. We talked to travel agents and we tried to make sure that they were protected in how that program works. On the border overall, you've already heard from the Prime Minister. a plan going forward on easing the measures when it comes to Canadians who can travel, who have had 2 vaccines. That's a first step. And I think we all have the ambition and the desire to reopen our borders, get back to regular life. I will say though, and this may be less welcome to the tourism people, I also really believe we need to be thoughtful and careful in how we do it. And I'm going to give you a specific example that may surprise people. Germany was like leading everyone and was like just in the G7. They were just super great in how they handled COVID. And they had a very difficult autumn. And they attribute that really significantly to a lot of travel that Germans did for summer holidays to countries that had more COVID. And I mention that just to say, my first priority is, of course, to protect the health and safety of Canadians. And part of that is avoid a 4th wave. And I very much believe with this reopening of the economy, we need to do it in such a way that we never have to drive backwards. We're already seeing some new unpredicted things like the Delta variant. I actually think we're going to pretty soon be in a situation where Canada has higher vaccination levels, including double vaccination, than very many other countries, because Canadians are super smart and we have really relatively low levels of vaccine hesitancy here. So I think we all have the shared ambition of opening up the borders, but I think none of us with hindsight are going to want to have moved too quickly and to have found that that precipitate action led to a 4th wave. So sorry to be not fully rah-rah on that, but I wanted to be honest.
So as we start wrapping up, Dan, I see you've come up, and I always invite people at the end of the webinars to make any last questions or comments. So Dan, why don't I start with you, and then I'll move to you, Corinne, and Minister will give you an opportunity to say some things, and then I'll bring us home.
The minister's been incredibly generous with her time, going well beyond, so I don't want to belabor the point, and also is going to be even more generous with our members in French, and having to endure my introduction of her in French, which will be brutal. But really, really grateful to you, Minister, for talking to our members today.
Yes, and I think that there's some eagerness from your staff for us to wrap this up. So thank you for your time. I think I appreciate it, and I know our members did as well.
And maybe I'll just join in with the thank yous there, but I'll give you a couple from members. Kathy is saying, you know, you're great and we're lucky to have you. And Natalia is saying, Chrystia, you're amazing. So proud that you are our minister. Thank you for all you do. So I'll let our members thank you, and I'll join with them in thanking you. And I agree that this pivot that you're talking about, it's really important to get that right. And it's so wonderful that we've got the kind of we don't always agree, I know that. And you know, we're pretty tenacious about getting those members, but we really appreciate, as Dan said earlier, that open dialogue. And I often start the webinars with a quote, so I'm going to end with one today that just for some reason is with me. When sometimes the barn burns down, and the barn burned down and now I can see the moon. So I like that one. And Chrystia, I'll give you the last and final word, and then we'll end.
Okay, well, thanks guys. Look, I just want to say 2 things. The first is really such a heartfelt thank you from me to all of you. And, you know, Dan and Lauren, Corinne, if you will permit me, I love these guys. I love working with them. But the you I mean is people actually running a small business. I really want you to know I have such admiration for you and such an awareness of how brave you have to be, how innovative, how entrepreneurial, how hardworking. and how like COVID, it's just been like you've had to pivot every single day. And I thank you so much for hanging in there. And, you know, please know that you're doing it for Canada. Like Canada really needs you to hang in there. So thanks a lot. And actually, you've been remarkable. Like the Canadian economy has done so much better than people thought. And it's because you guys are really smart and resilient and innovative. So thank you so much. And then the second thing I want to say is I think we can allow ourselves to start being optimistic now. I don't want to be all Pollyanna-ish. I don't want you guys to get the impression that I don't appreciate that there are still challenges ahead. But I think one of the things we can do for ourselves and for each other is to really recognize we're winning the fight against COVID, and the economy is going to come roaring back. I know a lot of you have taken on a lot of debt, but a lot of Canadian households saved a lot of money during COVID. And I would really like to encourage all of you to be bold, to be ambitious, to be entrepreneurial, to get those Canadian households to spend that preloaded stimulus with your businesses and to hire lots and lots of Canadians. I really am very optimistic about our country's ability to come roaring back. And I just want to encourage you, you know, Laura, okay, barn burnt down. Let's build that barn back. And let's build, in addition to a barn, I don't know, maybe the barn is for the cows. Let's build a stable for the horses. And let's build the best milking parlor ever as well. Because I think we all want not just to recover, but to really rebound more strongly than ever. And I think we can do it.
And let's make sure we can still see the moon too.
Okay,
so
the moon also.
And I just want to say to our members again, we will get your staff all of the because they're so grounding and there's so many, and I'm so sorry that we couldn't put every comment or question to you, but I know you'll find value in reading them, and so we'll bring those to your staff to get to you. And with that, I want to say a final thank you. Lots of thank yous coming in from members on this, and you know you'll keep hearing from us because we never give up, we never go away. That's our informal motto. And with that, we will.
It's true, guys. Just so your members know, it's very, very true.
It's true. And so we will, with that, we will say thank you and we will end the webinar.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.